More than an entire month has passed without a drop of aid into Gaza. No food, no fuel, no medicine, no commercial supplies. As aid has dried up, the floodgates of horror have reopened. Gaza is a killing field, and civilians are in an endless death loop.
The United Nations Secretary General outraged as Palestinians in Gaza suffer amid a lack of aid and continuing Israeli attacks. Hello, I'm Arnold Naidoo, and this is The Heat. More than 2 million Palestinians living in Gaza face a dire situation as food, fuel, medicine and other necessities are running out. This after the Israeli government imposed a blockade of humanitarian assistance into the enclave over a month ago. Jerusalem continues to batter and attack Gaza, with the Palestinian Health Ministry reporting a total of more than 50,000 Palestinians killed since the conflict began back on October 7th, 2023. When Hamas attacked Israel. We begin with this report from CGTN's Rami Al-Magari in Gaza.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres again this week emphasized on the need for the flow of humanitarian aid supplies into Gaza. The UN's chief also called for ensuring safety of all the humanitarian aid workers working under the dangerous conflict here in the Gaza Strip. This comes against the backdrop of shortage of food items, essential food items, including flour, sugar and cooking oil. All the goods available in the territory are becoming increasingly unaffordable. Meanwhile, majority of the households here have resorted to wood fires instead of gas due to the shortage of the cooking gas here in the territory. Also, amid the hardship, the Israeli army continues its airstrikes and bombardments and all over the Gaza Strip after the Israeli army had broken a 2-month ceasefire in early March, including the cutting of those aid supplies. Health officials here in the territory say that more than 1,300 Palestinians have been killed since then, amidst very shortage of medical supplies. Rami Al-Magari, CGTN in Gaza City.
To discuss this and more, let's bring in our guests. Joining us here in Washington, D.C., Dan Arbell is a scholar in residence at the Center for Israeli Studies at American University. From Virginia, Michael Maloof is a former senior Pentagon strategic analyst. From London, we're joined by Yossi Mekelberg. He is a senior consulting fellow with the Middle East and North Africa program at Chatham House. And Khalil Jahshan is executive director of the Arab Center right here in Washington, D.C. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Khalil, you know, we've been hearing of these reports coming out of Gaza. We heard there from a very outraged UN Secretary General. In addition to what he talked about, 70% of the enclave's water supply has been cut off. The water well and waste infrastructure has been destroyed. Israel has cut electricity. You know, our reporter gave us some idea of what life is like there, but what is your reading of what life is like day to day for Palestinians?
I think what we heard from the UN Secretary General is quite accurate and reflective of, personal experience. I mean, in talking to family and relatives in Gaza, they have been struggling to secure the most basic of basic supplies. Medicine, definitely, even as basic as bread. They had some hard time getting enough bread for the family yesterday. So here we are, a year and a half, since the beginning of this war. This is day 552, and more than 51,000 people have been killed. 10,000 or so are still unrecovered bodies. So about the total is then about like 61,000 between dead and unrecovered, and 115,000 injured. And we get the UN helpless, basically begging for Israel, supported by the United States, to release the pressure in preventing the supplying of basic humanitarian aid, food, fuel, medicine, commercial supplies, as the Secretary General just mentioned.
Khalil, the Israeli authorities have proposed what they call a new aid delivery procedure to get aid to Palestinians in Gaza, but the Gaza government says that it firmly and categorically rejects those proposals. It says the plan legitimizes Israel's illegal occupation. I mean, isn't this a bit of political grandstanding at a time when people are in need of aid, of water, of fuel, of medicines?
It is unfortunate to see all this bargaining as if we are in a souk, bargaining for vegetables. But the fact of the matter, this has been the policy of the Israeli occupation since the beginning of this war, a couple of weeks after October 7, when Israel's troops invaded Gaza. I mean, frankly, it's very difficult to take seriously these Israeli promises for a new system here, a new system there, when we know this is the same government that blackmailed the people before that, even in good times, when there was no genocidal war like this one. It's the same Israeli government that prevented, if you will, the distribution of unlimited supplies or the needed supplies of humanitarian aid, and tried to ration that aid. They even counted calories, saying, we know what's enough for a Palestinian body, and that's what needs to get in. As a matter of fact, from COGAT's perspective, they feel somehow that Palestinians are overfed.
Dan Arbell, the Israelis, when asked about this, have said, look, that what they were attacking are Hamas positions, and they want to also make sure when aid gets into Gaza that it doesn't get into the hands of Hamas as well. And they also say that civilians who are dying are either caught in the crossfire or they are being used as human shields by Hamas. In one of the most egregious incidents we saw over the past few weeks, 15 paramedics were killed. Initially, the Israelis said that it didn't happen, and then it said that security protocols which have been put in place to make sure that this doesn't happen, things like having emergency vehicles lights on or having their horns blaring and things like this, were not observed. But then it emerged that there was a videotape of what happened, and I want to play a little bit of that videotape before I get to you. Let's watch this.
هاي مرمين 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 بسرعة بسرعة هذا الشيء
Okay, Dan, very hard to watch, hard to hear. What is the Israeli explanation for what happened?
So the Israeli explanation, first of all, it's a regrettable incident and which should be condemned. The official explanation is that there's an inquiry still going on, and that soldiers that were on the scene there, while there were innocent aid workers there were also, they suspected terrorist activities there, and some of the people that have been targeted have been associated with Hamas. So it's not really clear. And again, I'm not here to, as an Israeli spokesman, I've seen reports that the IDF is investigating into this, and they'll publish their conclusions hopefully soon. But it should not have happened. Unfortunate that it did happen, and it's a tragedy of the Gaza Strip, which can end, once Hamas surrenders and allows the hostages to go back to Israel. If as long as that doesn't happen, pressure will continue on Hamas, and this stoppage to humanitarian aid will continue.
Dan, there's been one other development. I mean, the ceasefire that was in place for about just over 40 days, I mean, that's all but collapsed. But now what's happened is that the Israelis say the city of Rafah in Gaza and its surrounding neighborhoods, people in that city and those neighborhoods will be forced out. They will be evacuated, and there will be a new corridor established. What is Israel's goal here?
So, first of all, we've seen in the previous ceasefire hundreds of thousands of Gazans returning to the north, and then some of them remaining there, but a lot of them going back to the south. And in terms of security of the Gaza Strip and allow Israel to continue conduct its operations and try and get innocent civilians out of harm's way, they have established this new corridor called the Morad corridor, which they want to put into effect and to try and make their work more effective, and at the same time minimize the casualties, civilian casualties.
Michael Maloof, what do you make of these forced evacuations of Palestinians from Rafah and the surrounding neighborhoods? What does it mean?
I think it's ultimately to force the Palestinians out of Gaza altogether. And we're seeing they're trying to put pressure on the Egyptians to move them in there into Egypt. Egypt, meantime, is trying to work out a peace arrangement whereby the Palestinians actually stay, but the development of redevelopment of Gaza begins. The Israelis are resisting vehemently, and unfortunately, it's backed by President Trump in his most recent comments at one of his press conferences yesterday, where he wants the Palestinians basically to clear out and to move to neighboring countries. Mm-hmm. So this is their calculated effort to of ethnic cleansing and basically to slowly starve them out and move them out, and they don't care where they go. And this is part of their biblical mindset of how they treat people who are not like them, who are not Jewish. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, we're seeing it in action. It isn't just my word for it, but we're actually seeing it happen. And meantime, the Israelis are resisting any efforts to implement any second phase of a peace agreement.
Well, Michael, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was in Washington earlier this week. He was at the White House. He was welcomed there, very warmly welcomed there. He appeared in the Oval Office with President Trump on television. And at that time, President Trump again said Palestinians should be relocated and Gaza should be taken over by the United States. I mean, how significant was that visit by Netanyahu coming at this time?
Well, he was just there to give Trump his marching orders. Look, Trump introduced the initial idea with the hope that the neighboring countries would come up with alternatives. They have tried. They have done that. The Egyptians certainly have done that, and you have Qatar and Egypt working very hard to try and implement their version of a peace agreement, of a ceasefire. Ultimately, what introduction of phase 2 means is that the Israelis leave, but the Israelis do not want to do that. So that's why they're continuing this mindless effort of ethnic cleansing, and we're seeing it every day. And who's stopping him? As long as Netanyahu feels he's got Trump's support, he's going to do whatever he wants because no one's stopping him.
Yossi, Mekelberg, let's look at some of the diplomatic moves which are underway in the region right now. Earlier this week, there was this trilateral summit which took place between Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, the Jordanian King Abdullah, as well as the French President Emmanuel Macron. This is what al-Sisi had to say. Let's listen.
Achieving stability and lasting peace in the Middle East will remain out of reach as long as the Palestinian issue is left without a just resolution, and as long as the Palestinian people continue to face the scourge of grinding wars that destroy their foundations and deprive their future generations of the right to even hope for a more secure and stable future.
So Yossi, listening to President al-Sisi, I mean, it was nothing profound. I mean, we heard these things before. Did anything of substance come out of this trilateral meeting?
I think for now it's mainly aspirational. Those are very abstract declaration or statements at the time that the war is in full blow. I think the focus should be at this point on a ceasefire. You see, the old ceasefire of January basically been violated the minute that Israel resumed the war. Maybe at least until the first 6-7 weeks, the terms of the ceasefire were kept, even not at the spirit. At the minute that a second phase was not, the agreement of second phase was not agreed, this was the end of it, and the resumption of war made it obsolete. So while we see this kind of war, if Israel is trying to take more and more land, and we see some part of the far right returning into Israeli government, I think talking about the future in terms of two-state solution, I think it should be kept in mind, and the idea that maintaining the rights of Palestinian political, civil, and human rights, but the most important thing is to stop the war, ensuring the reconstruction of Gaza, having a new governance in Gaza, and then move into a more comprehensive thinking about resolving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Yossi, French President Emmanuel Macron also said that France is moving towards recognizing Palestine as a sovereign state, and that could happen as early as June. Israel is firmly opposed to that. There are many other countries in the world that do recognize Palestine as a sovereign state. But in this instance, coming from France, what is the significance?
I think it's long overdue, but it's also very significant. It's a major member of the European Union. I don't think at this point the EU as a EU would recognize it, because you need consensus of all countries, and we know some countries will oppose it, but we saw already countries like Ireland and Spain recognizing Palestinian statehood, and we'll see what other countries will follow suit. We know that without a US veto in the Security Council, there is been a very good chance for this to be recognized by the Security Council and by the United Nations. I think this is a significant. It's not recognizing Palestine as a Palestinian statehood is not only symbolic. It's significant in the way that future negotiation between Israel and Palestine will take place on the basis of two equal states negotiating the terms of the peace between them, and not between a state and an organization, the PLO. This asymmetry actually hindered reaching a peace over the last 30 years.
And Don Arbell, looking at domestic Israeli politics, I mean, we looked at those pictures of Prime Minister Netanyahu in the Oval Office with Donald Trump, getting fulsome support from Donald Trump for what he's doing. Does that, in a sense, reinforce his political position back home?
Certainly, Trump's backing is critical for Netanyahu, and he boasts of Trump's support. And it's important for him in consolidating his political base. However, we saw this week on Monday, when he was at the Oval Office, that he was pretty much, I'd say maybe he got support for Gaza, but he was pretty much caught off guard when Trump announced talks with Iran. He didn't get the reduction of the tariffs that he was hoping for. He got a presidential endorsement for Turkish President Erdogan and not supporting Israel's position in Syria. So he's not really, he's not on very solid ground. To say that he's dictating to Trump policies is inaccurate. I think that certainly, though, Netanyahu is all about images, and he's trying to project the image that Donald Trump is fully backing him and on his side, and that helps him in Israeli public opinion. But still, we have to remember that still 70% of the Israeli public in every poll do not trust him, do not trust Netanyahu, do not believe him, and feels that he's driven by political considerations rather than strategic security considerations when waging this war in Gaza.
Khalil, Jahshan, until there is a major change in policy by the United States, no matter which party is in power, whether it be the Republicans or the Democrats, I mean, could you ever see this quagmire stop? Could we ever see it move ahead?
I don't think so. You know, as a lifelong student of this conflict, even born in the middle of this conflict, and lived through all these phases, I find it very difficult to believe that this conflict can be resolved without a serious change in American policy regarding the Arab-Israeli conflict. The reason for that is not just because it's the United States. The reason for that is because the U.S. has decided to be part of the conflict, to essentially be a partner to Israel and to defend Israel. Historically, it did in all these different stages of the conflict. So short of that changing, it will be very difficult. And frankly, the past few years, you know, since let's say, the world community began to look at the two-state solution as a practical way to try to resolve the conflict, U.S. policy has been backtracking, actually going backward. I mean, I don't think we can interpret today this administration as supportive of the two-state solution. To the contrary, I think what we have seen with regards to Gaza from the president twice now in the presence of Mr. Netanyahu, re-emphasize its support for the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. I think we are inching closer to the ethnic cleansing of the West Bank. I think the rumors that started during the campaign 3-4 months ago that this administration will probably support Israel annexing most, if not all, of the West Bank is becoming a reality day in, day out. So this conflict, if it is indeed about the exchange of territory for peace, I guess in the absence of one half of the formula, I don't think we are going to have peace, you know, whether Israel wants peace or not. I mean, it's debatable at this time. I don't think this particular government wants it. But without American change in policy, it's not going to happen.
Right, and Khalil, looking at what's going on, you mentioned the West Bank there. Israeli forces have destroyed 600 homes in the occupied West Bank. That's near Jenin. There's also been a group of extremist colonial settlers called Hilltop Youth, and they've been attacking Palestinians as well. And that's what's happened in the past week, but this has been continuing for a long time, hasn't it?
Very long time indeed. You know, Hilltop Youth is not a new phenomenon in the West Bank. It's been in existence for years. Radicalism among settlers, armed settlers in the West Bank. They have been acting like a second army in a way and abusing the rights of Palestinians under Israeli occupation. It's getting worse, and I think essentially today, as the current Israeli government is openly supportive, at least key members of the cabinet and their movements are quite supportive of annexing the territory. I think that is reinforcing this behavior on the part of these extremists and giving them permission to proceed forward.
Michael Maloof, there is another grave danger here, which was something that came from an associate professor at the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies. You know, if we look at what's going on in Gaza right now, he recently told the Al Jazeera network that the world has now become used to the images and scenes which we see all the time, mainly on social media, sometimes on television as well. Burned kids, burned journalists, people dying under the rubble, genocide in Gaza, displacement in the West Bank. And we know with the current 24-hour news cycle, we have very, very short attention spans. It's something that's been normalized. I mean, do you agree with that assessment? And if you do, what are the implications then for the future of Palestinians?
Well, it has a numbing effect. Over time, you see that nothing ever changes, and that the Palestinians are being subjected to ethnic cleansing. There's no way to stop Netanyahu on the way that he's going. And I would suggest that Netanyahu did get what he wanted from Trump, and that is continued support, not only in in Gaza, he got that reinforced. And there are other areas such as bombing Iran, which is problematic, or Trump backing Turkey in Syria. That Trump has differences with Netanyahu. But what happens is that we see this repeatedly, and it has that numbing effect. And I think that being and looking at all this from a distance and then moving on to the next news cycle and to the next news story, we lose touch.
Yossi Mekelberg, I want to get your opinion on something that is not altogether unrelated, and that is the talks which will take place between the United States and Iran on Iran's nuclear program. I mean, that announcement was actually made by President Trump with Prime Minister Netanyahu sitting next to him. How will this be seen in Israel?
Well, it's interesting. I could only imagine what would have been Netanyahu's reaction to that had it been, for instance, Joe Biden talking about direct negotiation between Iran and the United States, and it would be highly criticized as caving into Iran. But I think Netanyahu won't dare to challenge Trump on this one. But I think it's a positive development. Depends what happened in negotiation. If Trump learned anything from his own failures by withdrawing from the JCPOA back in 2018, understand that actually negotiation means two countries at least involved and not unilateral decisions. And both sides are willing actually to address the need to stop Iran from developing nuclear weapons. I think it can be a positive development. But I think, you know, behind closed door, Netanyahu and his government will try their best to derail such negotiations.
Okay, and that is where we have to leave it. Thank you to all of you for being with us. That is it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington.